Greetings, everyone. Russell will be joining us shortly as he is wrapping up a kid's softball, baseball, volleyball, one of those. Well, it wouldn't be baseball, it'd be softball or volleyball. Welcome to the Jackets Online TV show, whatever we're going to call this. I have no idea. I'm Kelly Quinlan, publisher of Jackets Online on the rivals.com network. And yeah, it's been a wild month of June so far for us at Jackets Online. And I'll kind of start getting into some. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get into some of the questions that are less Russell centric here from the jump, and then when Russell jumps on here in a bit, we'll circle back and get into a lot of other stuff. So I guess I'll jump into the questions here, and then you guys can always ask in the chat. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Appreciate everyone joining us. Make sure you also subscribe to Jackets Online. It allows us to do the things we do, and it is always kind of vitally important that that's sort of our base of operations. So thanks for everyone. And the first question is kind of totally random, not necessarily on the topic that I was expecting to talk about today, but spent a few minutes talking about the state of the NCAA and what's going on with sports and athletes. Anything you can hear from people around the industry, people with good pulse who think X will happen within X amount of time. Thanks. Right now, I guess the news of the day is you have the whole situation with Florida State going on and them trying to fight in the wrong jurisdiction, the ACC, and there's a lot of like complicated things going on with that and then all the FSU media will jump on, oh, they didn't dismiss this, they didn't do X, Y, or Z. But the reality of this is it's sort of an elongated fight, and there'll be a lot of repercussions if somehow they were to prevail in the state of Florida that would possibly make networks and other conferences skittish about signing them up. So I think there's a lot going on here. A lot more than I'm capable of even commenting on. And so as far as I know people want to know about NIL and what's going on there, and I can tell you from having spent time with Coach Key and some of the other coaches at Georgia Tech and coaches at South Florida and some other schools this summer, that no one knows. Like, no one knows exactly what's going to happen. They're going to implement some roster limitations, I think, to get away from people being able to just park kids on NIL and have them pay their way into school to get around the scholarship caps. You're starting to see that thing go on a little bit. And they've given basically the football staff in that particular market. Basically, they told them maybe October, November, you'll know what your hard cap is going to be for 2025, and that's crazy. So if it goes to, like, say there's a hard 85, 90 roster limit, then you're going to see guys get like cut and commitments cut from schools and stuff. So this whole thing's just completely absurd. There's like no management at all of what's going on. It's pretty much the Wild West and the 1800s, and everyone's street fighting with pistols. And so I don't know what to expect. I think that I think everyone's guess is as good as mine. I think that this is just a totally nuts situation right now, and that's all. I like every day. I wonder kind of what the new thing is going to be, and that sort of sucks. And if your living's based on covering college athletics, to have so much uncertainty about it, but I think it can be exciting. I think it's in some ways a leveler for some programs, and eventually, when this all settles down, I think there will be some parity. And hopefully college football won't become a parody of itself in the process. What new changes are coming to the stadium game experience that you can share? Will we have grass in 2024, 2025? I don't believe grass is in the immediate future. Obviously, I think Coach Key would like to have grass. I think that if you were to ask him honestly about it, he would tell you that. But he's got to toe the company line, and quite frankly, they have other things they need to spend their money on right now. But there's changes. There's always changes coming along. They're trying to improve the vending. They're trying to improve the situation in terms of just like the overall amenities in the stadium. But the big thing is they're going to eventually address the seating. And I think seat backs are coming. I think they're going to cut the capacity down even more, try to make it into more of like Truist or Mercedes Benz type atmosphere where you have nice seating, nice vending, and it's a little bit less of stepping back into a time warp when you go into that tunnel and everything looks like it did. Yeah, the first time I went in the stadium, which was in '99 or 2001 or whatever, as a spectator watching a Georgia Tech game. So yeah, I think stuff's coming. I just don't know when. Or I guess 2001, I would have been in the press box covering it. Whatever. Either way, it's like nothing's changed, and in terms of just the appearance of things, and there's lots of ways you can gussy it up. Those who've been in Notre Dame, they've done a nice job of slapping some lipstick on that pig in terms of making the underneath part of their stadium look nicer. Florida State's sort of the other way, where it still kind of looks old. I think there's some middle ground there where you can find. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Digging through more questions. I always like this one. When is the grade and following for you guys? Um, I don't know. I joked with Russell about that. Maybe it was on the last time we did one of these, but like, we used to do this thing where we'd like unfollow kids that didn't commit or whatever. And I kind of like stopped doing it a long time ago. If they still followed me, I would keep following them for a while. And now with the portal, we've seen so many guys get circled back, even guys that like we were tracking that maybe had like an early, temporary offer and like or non-committable offer, and then ended up bouncing back. And like when that happens, like you have to just like kind of maybe maintain some of those relationships. And there's some kids that like I'm not gonna like say out loud, but there's kids I think that will end up at Georgia Tech eventually on the rebound, and or if they go prove themselves at a smaller school or something. And so those relationships I will maintain, and then hopefully it'll pay off on the back end. And same with Russell and a lot of kids I like following just what they're up to and seeing what they're doing. There's ones that have become friendly with. Russell, the same thing. I think there's a lot of kids that we both kind of like maybe that don't end up at Georgia Tech or a school we cover. So I think that's part of it. But the grade of following seems to have really calmed down quite a bit. Do you have any info as to why IOTF Fosse left? Yeah, he was getting beat out by a walk on. Like, he wasn't very good and wasn't going to be in the rotation, and they're recruiting over him. And they took the kid from Penn State, and he basically replaced him straight up, Jordan Vanderberg. And then they've added other players, and they had Shameik Jones coming back. And then brought Jason Moore back now. So like that dude just wasn't going to play, wasn't good enough to play right now. And he wants to play, so he wanted to go find a place that he could play. I'm not saying down the line he might not be good, but I think that eventually he will find a place to play. But it wasn't going to be at Georgia Tech. Oh, my little son's upstairs crying for me. That's hurts my heart as he's trying to go to bed late. We were fourth. Okay, question. We were fourth in the ACC, 31 points per game on offense, and 13th in defensive points per game in 2023. Where do we end up this year? Who is the difference maker on defense? They'll end up in the top half of scoring defense. So this gets back to something I talked about a lot. You want Georgia Tech to be in the top half of the defensive trends. So the way you would look at it is they were like in the bottom, whatever, 1/6 of college football last year. If you're in the top half, in the top 50%, I would say the odds of them being in contention for the ACC championship game into the final two ACC games of the season would be 80 to 90%, right? And then if you look at if you're in, you go bowling, in my opinion, if you're top 80, even with the hard schedule. So like those are sort of the milestones I'm watching for. The difference makers in terms of who will be difference makers on the defense. I think you look up front; they're very experienced on the defensive line and the inside. I think they've upgraded with Romello Height at that rush spot a little bit. I think he gives you a little more than you got the last couple of years from those guys. And I like Kyle Kennard and I like Noah Collins, and Kyle Harris has been a guy who hasn't quite put it all together yet. But like they've got talent now with Kevin Harris and Romello now at that rush spot. If Sylvain's healthy, that's a big if. If he's healthy, then that really changes that dynamic too at the defensive end position. And I think they got a chance to be pretty good. With all the guys they've added, they can slide Micaiah Scott out and play him at end some, especially in rundowns. Gives you a bigger front. They're just bigger and more physical up front, and that's going to make a huge difference in my opinion. I think you have Kyle Eford back. I think Trent Tatum will benefit from Santucci in the way that he is making him focus on details. The one thing that was interesting about Trent is like it seemed like the more things went off the rails kind of for him and he was struggling, the better he would play if he got benched and was angry. And he's got to figure out how to channel that. I don't know what it is about him being inconsistent as a starter, but when he would come off the bench or get benched and then come in, he play a lot better. They got to figure out how to make that happen. Um, Somebody asked why Chad Bishop, who writes for the AJC, uses recruiting info from 24/7. I think Rivals is much more superior. Thanks. Chad worked for 24/7. He was a Vanderbilt 24/7 guy. So that's where his former allegiance is in terms of just looking up info. I'm sure, still has like a Compt account on there and stuff. And so that's what's going on. There's a really long question about Dame Sarr visiting Arizona on Friday. And there's no confirmations, blah, 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 blah. It's wondering if Dame Sarr would fly home or does he go to his next visit in the Atlanta site. I haven't heard anything about Dame Sarr. I just finally reconnected with one of my good basketball sources today. We've been so knee deep in football that it's just been all about that and not about just trying to keep afloat of everything that's gone on over the last couple of weeks, and then also having stuff going on. Georgia Tech's NIL strategy seems to be performance-based with incentives for being productive in college football. Field, in 2025, how many high school recruits do you think G2 will make an exception for this rule? You are thinking about this in the way that I described NIL maybe 8 months ago, 9 months ago. Things have changed completely. That's the way I would describe it. There's far more people getting some type of NIL now. It's significantly changed. It's shifted. Brent has done a good job of raising money. They still need more money, and they're using it correctly. And they're using it on a mixture of performance-based stuff, taking care of guys, taking care of the Eric Singletons or Haynes King, or even like a guy like Zach Pyron as a backup quarterback. And the importance of that, you saw that with Florida State last year. They didn't make the playoffs simply because they didn't have a real backup quarterback. Like all of those things are being applied to it. But the way you got to look at NIL strategies is an ever-changing thing, and it's also based on your resources and what's going on in the marketplace too, and what are your priorities and all of those things. So it is a constantly evolving thing. I don't think I've like talked about that structure for probably since December or something like that, but like it has shifted a little more. Um, Someone asked about preferred walk-ons. I'll actually have that's all done already. Preferred walk-ons, that's basically your spring, like winter recruiting after signing day. Those guys are all done. A lot of them are actually on the school roster already. You can look them up. I could probably tell you a few of them, but some of them we've made comments to, some we haven't. Um, So I mentioned the Celtics. Yes, my Celtics won their 18th championship last night, and a very non-competitive game. I turned it on, and it was like a 20-point game already. I was like, oh, and that was like in the first half. Someone asked to compare this class to 2007. That's hard. I mean, that class had some really elite NFL level talent dudes on it, and then some real like kind of glue guys that were key parts of Georgia Tech football for a long time. So I don't know. It's very hard. I think that's like a comparison you make in 3 years from now, not right now. Like I can't go in and say that, whomever is going to be the next John Dwyer and whoever is going to be the next Roddy Jones and so is going to be Derek Morgan and Morgan Burnett. Speaking of Morgan Burnett, I ran into Morgan Burnett at the Corky Kell at Georgia Tech. He's coaching at Walton High School now, which is pretty cool. We talked for like about 30 minutes. It was good to catch up with him. I hadn't seen him since probably pro day in February of 2010 or something like that. So that's cool. Can you ask Anthony Carey not to use the nickname Scooter? I noticed the new commits called him that. Yeah, he's had that nickname for a long time, Scooter. I wouldn't worry about it. It's Scooter with an A, not Scooter like you guys use it. Has Grady Adamson done any camp 7-on-7s this summer anywhere? How he's looked? No, I'm trying to go out to see him actually. I want to go see him, see how he's doing. Non-sports fun question. What assets request did the AA make TEA sports to be put in college football 25? Any confirmation of what made it a game for Tech? What Tech stuff or non-Tech stuff are you and Russell most interested in seeing? And I'll ask Russell. I'll make a note to ask him about this when he jumps on. Sorry, I'm just making a note to myself to ask him about that. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, all the kids I've talked to are opted into the game, and they said that they got like a check and they get a free copy of the game or something like that, and they're excited about it. I'm just excited the game's back. I went out and bought an Xbox when they confirmed that the game was coming back. I wanted to be ahead of the curve, and I figured my 14-year-old was ready for like a real game system. He had been on the Switch, and he's been loving it, and we play like the EA soccer game together. So that's pretty cool. He enjoys that a lot. Someone asked about Buster's contract extension. Could we see an explosion in coaches' salaries, including Keys, if the season goes well? Yes and no. I think the days of some of those like contracts are kind of gone. You're seeing people being a little more careful about how much they're willing to invest in those big deals, and I think, sorry, give me 1 second, guys. So going back, sorry, to the college. Yeah, I mean, Brent Key's been giving you the hometown discount. Same thing with Damon Stoudemire if he wins. Like there will be an increased investment, but the idea is that you also have that you'll have more resources coming in because you'll be selling more tickets, blah, 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 blah. They've invested more into salaries. They've invested broadly into the college football program and the men's basketball program with Jay Batt running the show. But they're still not like totally competitive in some aspects with market value for what Georgia Tech fans expect, which is to have, a top 25 level salary. And the other thing that I always mention too is the cost of living here is way more expensive than a lot of other places. Like the cost of living in Atlanta versus Starkville or um, Tampa, or well, not Tampa is a bad example. Gainesville or some of these other college towns is totally different, and so money doesn't go as far either. So I think that's so. Do, 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 do. Um, mm, do I expect Jason Moore to take regular snaps this fall? What role do you envision him for coming back from Temple? He wasn't happy at Temple. He came back. He's sort of in a similar role as he is the football equivalent of the Carter Murphy this year, where I think he's sort of a freebie for them and come back doing grad school. And I think that it's going to be an interesting to see how he's used. They were excited to have him back, but I'm curious where he fits in too, because there's, you got Horace, you've got Zeke, you've got Machias, you've got the kid from Penn State. You added Thomas Gore from Miami. You brought in Landon Marshall. You have Shameik Jones, who we haven't seen yet, who the staff is still high on. So I think there's a lot of interesting pieces. Do, 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 do. Any updates on the Bo Walker OV, assuming he made it? No, Bo Walker was not Bo Walker was sick and did make it 2 weeks ago for his OV. Are you going to play college football game? And if so, what team are you starting your dynasty with? That is a really good question. I always would pick UMass because they were awful, and that's where my parents went to school. My brother briefly attended, and a lot of my family went to school there. And I would try to build UMass up, usually running an option or something like that. And it was way too quick in that game, like in the old games. I'm hoping this is a little more competitive and harder to swing and make that happen. But yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how the new gameplay is. I haven't played Madden in years. I just am not a huge NFL guy, so the draw to play the Madden game wasn't there. So I'm sure there's gonna be a little bit of a learning curve for me as well. From the chat, do I have any thoughts on Willie Mays? Willie Mays was an amazing baseball player and really great guy from all accounts I saw. But other than his sad year with the Mets, he had an amazing career, and he was a great ambassador for baseball. And we're starting to lose a lot of these guys. They've started to pass in the last few years, Bill Russells and people like that, like Willie Mays. A lot of these guys who went through difficult times, went through the transition and from desegregation in baseball and making the transition to playing. And he was obviously part of the, establishment of playing baseball out in California too, when they moved the team from New York. And just an amazing baseball player. And it's crazy to think that how many of those guys are going to start drop off in the near future. And there's a lot of kids who don't necessarily know who Willie Mays is, and that's one of the things that was always great about baseball is just the amount of knowledge that people had about the history of the game and stuff. And I wonder how much of that's being retained by kids now. And the game's so completely different. So I don't know. I think it's going to be an interesting time for all of that. Um, Someone asked about the spring enrollees. Have they moved in yet? Yeah. They all, everyone's on campus that's supposed to be right now. I think there's Cole Kerouac, the basketball player, is not. He may end up playing a prep year. Um, and football wise, I think everyone's there. I've seen most of the guys on campus at these camps. Like they come by and hang out or whatever, and you get to say hello to them. Um, the young defensive linemen look really good. David Brents looks really good. The young tight end. I'm trying to think who I didn't see. But yeah, and they had a huge mid-year class too. I mean, like all of the offensive linemen, I think, except for Kai Greer, enrolled early, and so like that kid's in a tough spot now because all those dudes have a jump on him. So he's probably stuck with like a redshirt year. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see kind of how they do all that, and um, I'm curious, to see what happens. Um, Someone asked about you're at more commitments, is and this guy made the point of commitments. Yeah, there's more stuff coming. We aren't done with our stories. I have 3 more in the hopper. I think it's let me look, that we haven't run yet. That's a big hit for you guys. 2 more that are ready, and then there's 2 more that we need to probably pre-write. um so yeah, there's a lot going on there. Let's go back to the questions. Would Key have been ready to be a head coach if Georgia Tech had hired him in 2019 instead of Jeff Collins? Is what happened. I think this worked out perfectly because Brent Key isn't going to get hired in 2019. There's no scenario. He had they had a really rough ending at UCF. The wheels just completely fell off the bus that last year there, and he was saddled with being the offensive coordinator, which he hated doing. It turned out didn't like it, and it was just a huge fiasco. He'll be the first to tell you that. And things went sideways, and I think that the reality is that there was no scenario in which he was going to be the head coach. You would have had a better shot at probably just about anyone, like at that point in time, being the head coach instead of him. He just like that would have been beyond a crazy hire because he hadn't worked at Georgia Tech and at that point um, almost 20 years, right? So like uh, it would be like completely random, like hiring a random assistant off the street that no head coaching experience. The situation worked out perfectly. It's sort of like what happened to his mentor with George O'Leary, where George was a little more probably on that pathway towards being a head coach just because he was a coordinator and had won a national championship at Georgia Tech. But like you look at Brent and things just fell into place, and he was the guy that made sense to be the head coach, the interim head coach. And then he took the ball and made the most of it. That happens throughout the history of sports. I think that it's just like one of those things that is a magical occurrence for Brett Key and his life. And the other example I'll give of this is probably what's going on over at Georgia State, and we don't know how that's going to turn out. But if Del McGee doesn't have a huge, I mean, if what was that guy's name? Sean Elliott doesn't freak out and go back to South Carolina, then maybe Del McGee's still a running back as coach. There's a huge domino effect from all that. So, hey Russell, you there, bud?
I sure am.
Someone was asking me about Will's asking if Brent should have been hired in 2019 as head coach, and I was explaining that he needed a very specific set of circumstances, and that it was akin to sort of how Del McGee became a head coach, and it might be how Tashard Choice gets a job somewhere one day too. I was talking to Morgan Burnett about that when I bumped into him. Morgan's of the same feeling that I am, that Tashard, and I think you are too, Russell, will be a head coach one day somewhere in college football.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's just a matter of time and the right opportunity. I don't know if that's going to be in the state of Georgia or if it's going to be in the state of Texas, where he's really kind of cut his teeth the last few years.
And he is beloved in Texas too because of his time playing for the Cowboys. You played for the Cowboys once, and you've got that like seal of approval, and as long as things don't go weird. So I'll dive into the questions for you. I went through and did the ones that were not for me before you jumped on. I mean, that were not for you or not centric to you. Um,
Did you talk about the new basketball commit?
No, no one's asked about that actually.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't know. I wasn't. I've been in 10U softball preparing for the World Series this weekend. So
There you go. So the first question is something like I wrote about on, was it Sunday, Monday? I can't even keep track of the days now. My Q's take thing about like the recruiting. It's about what is key done to revamp the recruiting so quickly and getting in on 5 stars and going head to head with Georgia so much. What is he doing well? Um, and why wasn't Georgia Tech getting top guys like Notre Dame or Stanford or whatever? And Key's changing that narrative, I guess would be the way you'd say it. So I mean, you can go read my thoughts on it. I wrote about it on Sunday, but Russell, you want to share some of your thoughts about this because you're obviously a little bit closer to the recruiting aspect of it than I am.
yeah. So I mean, I think to be honest, it starts at the in the back end where you were able to hire a guy as well known and talented. Two of them. You had Bill Stewart and the McFarland from
Tim
the
McFarland.
yeah. You were able to bring both those guys on, and being able to utilize those relationships to not just get into doors that you may have not had open, but to be able to have the type of conversations to be able to have an event like the Corky Kell the last 2 years at Georgia Tech. Almost all of those high school coaches who are spending time at Tech really appreciate the energy and the new direction of the program. The emphasis on in-state recruiting, it wasn't just a flash in the pan. It wasn't just a we're going to go see this guy, and this guy. They hit it hard. They were all over the place in all of the evaluation periods. They were going out and seeing a bunch of guys. The Jahari Medlock kid. They were able to see him in the spring. They were able to see Xavier Canales in the spring, and that's really where things blew up for him was when Cincinnati went and saw a guy like him, and then Georgia Tech went and saw a guy like him, while also seeing the improved Jonte Gilbert. And at that time, you're able to captivate on those relationships. And what Brent's been able to do also is hire guys who aren't just good recruiters; they're good relationship builders. They're good closers, and that's not always the same thing. A good recruiter and a good closer aren't always the same thing because a good recruiter is a guy who's going to evaluate the guys who are for the most part, in my opinion, being evaluated by several others, and they may be a little bit hesitant about being the first, but a good closer, in my opinion, which is also a good evaluator, is never afraid to be the first offer and never afraid to jump the gun a bit compared to others. And I think that's what some people were talking on the board about what they think happened with Canales. I think a couple people also said that they might think that would be what happened with the Roush kid, but I would say that both those kids also camped at Georgia Tech.
Yep.
I mean, it starts with the infrastructure there too. The recruiting infrastructure at Georgia Tech is so much different than it was back then. They're having the like I said, the Quirky Cal 7-on-7 is a huge evaluation event, and they've been able to hone in so much and focus so much of their time and evaluation on that they're evaluating the kids during that. The position coaches, the coordinators, and Brent aren't out there keeping the stopwatch to see if a kid's getting sacked. They've got the score Atlanta or whatever. No offense to them. Please don't take offense to it. I don't remember the exact name of the companies. I think it's Score Atlanta, and that side of things, they're the ones who are handling that and running that. So that for Georgia Tech, it's just a huge recruiting tool, and but that's not even the only thing. They're also hosting coaches clinics where coaches are knocking on the door, wanting to get there, wanting to get around Brent Key, wanting to understand his philosophy. And I think it's just really been a snowball effect, and it's created a massive amount of excitement for a 7-6 team going into this season.
Well, you touched on something else too. Like it goes even beyond like the Bill Stewart, like adding Jeff Simpson or like Trent McKnight, who was like a last second addition, and that whole fluke thing with Del McGee and like getting cast, he has been a huge addition for them recruiting South Georgia and leveraging relationships down there. That's why Brent hired him. Like it was as much about that as anything else. And like I remember talking to Brent about it when after the hire was made, and he was like, "Yeah, this dude, people love him, like down in South Georgia. He knows how to recruit that area. We haven't." He Brent was like, "We haven't hit the way we should down there on kids. We need to get back in there. We need a new
Yeah,
connection." And he's a guy that's building that bridge and having. They have different kinds of personalities too. You got Corey Peebles or Norv or Jeep Wade. They have all these various personalities that reflect, I think, the different aspects of kids that you see. You have like kind of the country guy in Jeep, or like the like kind of almost intellectual Georgia Tech esque guy in Norv, and Corey's kind of like a city dude. Um,
grinder.
yeah, and you got these different dudes that have these different personalities. I think they have a nice kind of mesh, and everyone knows they got to work hard. And I think that was as much of a problem in the past, whether it was covering Paul Johnson's staff. There were guys who just didn't work very hard in recruiting, and the same with Jeff. There were guys that didn't go to schools. And that's something else that kind of came out through all of this, that there's been some schools that like they're back in for the first time in years. Like they haven't really even sent a body down to check them out. They're turning over stones to try to find guys. And it's being noticed by the coaches across the state. And you're always going to be at a bit of a disadvantage because so many of the coaches around Georgia grew up UGA fans. But the thing that's a little different with Brent is he's commanding respect from um, those people, even the UGA fans, the UGA alums, the UGA centric guys that want to send their guys there are like, damn, we might hate Georgia Tech, but we like and respect Brent Key and
Yeah, yeah. Well,
and the
and
staff that he's put together too, Buster and all of those guys. Santucci's a guy that a lot of people respect. Like,
yeah,
um,
he's not
Jess
he's not
Simpson.
scared.
No, that's the biggest thing to me is like Brent does not care. He'll go toe to toe with Bama, Georgia, whoever to like recruit a kid. And they're in what was it? We did come up with is it 7 head-to-head battles right now?
Let's
7 or
see.
8.
Landon rolled in. Apologize if I pronounced his last name wrong. Then you've got Christian Garrett, Jonte Gilbert,
Cortez,
Cortez Smith,
Demola.
Damola Ajitahoon. Look at that, I
Um,
pronounced that right. um, oh gosh,
Technically Bo Walker, if you want to get into that, like they were
yeah,
recruiting Bo Walker pretty hard.
yeah.
Um, he's
Until
committed to
he
Georgia.
until he got
Uh,
sick.
until he got sick and missed his visit. I already
He's,
touched him that earlier.
he missed both visits. He was supposed to be there for a 7-on-7 with Stockbridge, his new team he transferred to this summer, and then he was also supposed to be there for an official visit, and
Yeah.
he was sick. But according to Stockbridge, at least when they were there, he may not even be eligible this season. So that's interesting.
That's fun. Um, so whatever that ended up being, like, the Louisiana wide receiver,
Oh,
aren't
Philip
they?
Wright.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're both on Philip Wright.
yeah, yeah. He's going
There's
to
a bunch of
Michigan,
them,
but
man. Like,
well, I mean, let me rephrase that. If I was to put in a future cast, it would be for him to land at Michigan.
they're all trying to get him. Um,
Yes, yeah,
uh, which also that's kind of a wild card in all of this too. Is like if kids don't end up at either school, usually they end up at one or the other. But
yeah. I'd say Cortez will end up at one or the other. Demola will end up at one or the other. I think John Taylor will end up at one or the other, and Landon will end up at one or the other. And I think that's kind of what I don't know. Obviously, I haven't been around the Georgia Tech fan base for much of their success over the years. I've been covering them since 2018 and the start of Jeff Collins. So didn't really get a chance to see much success. But I would prepare yourself as a fan to be ready for the recruiting battles between Georgia Tech and Georgia to heat up. And there's going to be, I don't know if it's going to be this cycle where, it's maybe 60-40, maybe 40-60, but that's coming if, Brent can keep the program going the way he wants it to and the way he's working to make happen.
Well, so we go back to my first year covering Georgia Tech, the first recruiting cycle I covered, which would have been the 2010 class. Georgia Tech's coming off beating Georgia in '08 and then winning the ACC during that next season. So they had a lot of hype going into that year, and they were going head to head on lots of kids. And really, it was about 2 years later that kind of trailed off as um, things changed and the dynamics changed a little bit. And um, Tech stopped putting as many guys in the NFL, and there was a lot of things that went on. But yeah, I mean, it's been a long time since it's been where it's like legit. Hey, this, there was times where I think the previous head coach was celebrating wins on guys that maybe had an offer from Georgia as a sophomore. You know what I mean? They weren't being actively recruited. There's a big difference between that, like taking a dunk on something, being like, "Oh, we got this kid," and a kid OVing there and OVing at Georgia Tech, or vice versa, which has happened a lot in the cycle. Um,
Yes.
and so I think that's good. I think it's good for the rivalry. I think Georgia fans would tell you that, and if they're being honest with themselves, like they want it to be more. They don't want it to turn into Vanderbilt because there's no point in them playing that as a non-conference game. They need to have a competitive rivalry. It's good for the school. It's good for the state of Georgia for both programs. It's good for college football for Georgia Tech and Georgia to be competitive and to be a more even series. And Brent spends every waking moment thinking about what it'll take to get his team to where they're in that position where they're not like a 14-point underdog going into a game in Athens or whatever. Like, that's just how he operates. Someone asked about missing on Petty, if that's a big swing and miss. If he goes to Florida State, I don't
I was
know.
going to
I mean,
ask, did he commit somewhere while I was at practice?
not to my knowledge, my friend. I've been
I
on
didn't,
here, so
I
um,
didn't think so because no, he's going to Florida State this weekend, and Florida State was smart. They lined up his visit with his sister moving in down there, and I think that is a bigger factor for the visit for the family to be able to be paid to visit there and not paid you paid for. Um,
yeah, they're getting their like have they
they're
would have had to go down there anyways, but now it's their transportation's being covered.
yeah, and I've said on the message board several times. I think there are some things and some factors in his recruitment that have been kind of overblown. I think academics are such a big deal to him and his family. After meeting both his mom and his dad, I think that academics are going to be one of the determining factors there. I know you still think probably he ends up on the West Coast.
Yeah, I don't know what to think. That one's harder. I used to have a really good in with that staff with when Dave Shaw was a coach. So I need to go check. I know like one of like the biggest money people at Stanford, and he's like plugged into all this stuff, and he could tell me what's going on. And I've just forgotten with everything going on. We've barely had like time to breathe. I was at a doctor's appointment today when Canales committed, and it's like we're trying to
Yeah,
like figure out how to
I was in a
tomorrow.
meeting.
Tomorrow I'm going to vacation, so there'll be invariably like surprise commits or something like.
And Georgia Tech will
um
be joining the SEC.
yeah, it'll be something crazy that'll happen. That's almost guaranteed. I'll be in the car for like 6 hours driving to the beach, and like something's gonna happen bad, and I'm gonna have to like pull over. Um, Someone asked about interior D line recruiting, so defensive tackles. With uh, obviously with Garrett committing to Georgia, what are the other prospects? What are the things looking like? Because you have Zeke and Machias leaving after this year, and Jason Moore and the Gore kid also, I think. So
Yeah, I think he has
um,
1 year too.
yeah, so I guess kind of where they stand on the interior defensive line spots. I feel like they're taking two high school kids. I would say.
Yeah,
Um,
I think I left one D tackle off of the predictions I did today, but I'd probably predict him to flip.
Yeah,
from his currently
there's
committed
one
school.
we're being a little quiet about, and then
Um, but I think they can get the kid from New York if they want him.
like
And I
Bellin or
mean,
Beelan
yeah,
or
yeah. I think the only thing there is if Duke maybe turns it on and pushes the brother card. I think
yeah,
that's the only real thing, or if he wants
and
to
they're
stay
getting the last
closer to
OV.
home.
They got the OV this weekend, Duke, with him.
Yeah. But the crazy thing is he visited Syracuse the weekend before he went to Georgia Tech. Jaden Mann visited Syracuse the weekend before he went to Georgia Tech. Isaiah Mizell went to Syracuse the weekend before he went to Georgia Tech. And there were a couple, at least two out of the three that I just mentioned. They actually eliminated Syracuse while they were at Georgia Tech, and for the
That with
hype,
UCF too, with some kids. Like,
yeah,
who was the one that did that the other day, and we were laughing about it. We were texting each other. That was funny that he like told us his top schools, and they weren't in it, even though he OV'd there.
yeah,
I'll have
there's
to pull up their
Jonte,
visit. Oh, was it Jonte? That was yeah.
yeah,
It was
yeah,
like, damn, that's cold. They were like the first team to bring you in, and you're just like, nope.
yeah. I think
But hey, I mean, if they feels that way, that's how he feels. Maybe he just didn't like it when he was down there. I have no idea how many
you're right.
times he's been to Central Florida.
Yeah,
So I don't have a read on that. But yeah, I think they've got a couple of guys. There's a few other guys they could turn up on.
yeah. No,
Um,
the kid they offered from Hoover last weekend is somebody who I could see
oh yeah, I forgot to put
visiting
him on the board. Yeah.
visiting in July, and then possibly committing. I don't know if they're going to have some big type of like barbecue event or some flashy thing like some other schools do, but they'll host visitors and there will be food involved, I'm sure. And I expect the Hoover D lineman to be there. And then, oh gosh, I'm trying to remember who the other one is. I mean, Christian Garrett. They're not going to give up on Christian Garrett, especially if Georgia lands the D lineman interior that they're going after. Like, I mean, Christian Garrett, he's going to be an afterthought to the fan base and likely to maybe even the staff. I don't know. Trey Scott's a little bit smarter than that, but anything can happen. Especially with a kid like that when you've got Philo in his ear. I mean, Philo, he's been doing a ton of recruiting lately between Christian Garrett and then Landon this past weekend. He was his host. It's been a lot of work for the freshmen because you had him hosting, you had Trey Maddox, you had Scooter Carey. Everybody loves the nickname Scooter.
Gouda.
And then you had Harrison Moore hosting. You had Jamison Riggs hosting this month. I mean, so many freshmen, early enrollees, were out there hosting kids and trying to help the class, which is different because normally you would think would be more on the upperclassmen side or that kind of thing. But I don't know. Dylan Leonard's gone, so they lost their ultimate closer.
Well, they remember they had Jason Moore hosting guys, which was very funny because that's when it came out that he was back.
Yeah,
That's
yeah. I had to
one
sit
of my
on that
favorite.
for a while.
Um,
Gosh, I think that was 3 months ago. I learned that he was coming back. 4 months? I don't remember. It was something like that. But yeah, it
I'm putting
was
that kid on
interesting.
the offer before I forget the Troy guy. Uh,
Is he committed to Troy?
yeah, Drame or I don't know how you say his name.
Yeah,
Hoover kid that Brent is very fond of. Who was like the only kid that I really noticed. Though like there was a couple, but the O-line D-line camp, he was one of the few that like really stood out. One of the few offers out of that.
Oh, Landing. Yeah, and so while we're talking about him, I forgot I talked to him. He's actually from Atlanta and ended up moving over there. Let's see, when did he move? Pretty recently, but um,
That
I
makes
guess
sense. I
Simpson
didn't get a
compared
chance
him
to
to
talk to
Grady
him because
Jarrett.
I wasn't sure what was going to happen with him. So I was waiting to
Yeah,
see if he like actually got offered or not, and then
Yeah.
at that camp. So let's jump into this question. No, there's not another portal. Kids who are in the portal are eligible to come to a team right now. There's not much left in the basketball or the football, the world. So not
No.
really.
No
Will we have some
basketball.
basketball talk tonight? Yes.
Oh, I thought that was baseball. Darn it, Kelly.
Does it? Is it? You want it to be baseball? I had a guy yell at
There's
me on Twitter about Aiden Finateri leaving. Uh, Someone asked about the UGA head-to-head battles. We actually kind of answered that.
Georgia
I feel
Tech
like we answered
baseball's
the
got
question.
some big news coming in the next 24 hours. So
Oh, cool. Yeah,
they
some guy
got
accused me of being positive. I was like, I was just wasn't being a dick about the guy leaving. Like, I was like, good luck to him. It's like he has pitched a lot of games at Georgia Tech, so it was a significant loss of experience, which is how
yeah,
I
he
put it.
was Vinatieri was one that they really hyped up as a true freshman,
Hmm.
and they put him in some situations, and they said that he had this, pretty really strong composure, but that composure, kind of and confidence, composure and confidence kind of go hand in hand, and he started to lose his confidence, and then in some situations early on, started to lose his composure and lost his control. But this year, I mean, I think while statistically it wasn't great, like you said, he was relied upon and relied upon heavily, and the pitching staff obviously didn't meet expectations, but he was a key part of that team. And when they were going on their run, he was the one consistently pitching deep into games and missing bats. And I don't know. I'll be interested to see
Just
where
give
he
up
ends up
a
though.
lot of home runs. That was his problem.
Yeah, yeah, that's the problem.
Uh, Russell made a comment that he would make predictions for those who have visited. Can he do that during the show? No, I feel like that's like a subscription. We gotta put that behind the paywall. If Russell's gonna go give his prediction for each official visitor this fall, that I actually can't believe you dug yourself into that hole, buddy. That's pretty funny.
It is what it is. Everybody loves a good prediction. I think
Yeah, it's
I'm
fine.
perfect so
They just
far. So
take it out on us when we're wrong, which is always very funny because then it makes us not want to do predictions.
yeah, I'm at the point now where I've got the Mike Farrell thickness of skin. I can handle it.
Yeah, hopefully, you don't have the crazy takes that my old friend puts out there on social media.
No, gosh, no interest in that.
Uh,
Just
this is a good question for you. Which of the commits look the most college ready? I think you've seen everybody in person, and I've seen like probably half of them, a little more than
most
half.
college ready.
Yeah, like their body looks college ready.
Ooh, of the commits. Let's see here. Looking down the list. Do, 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 do. I'd say Andre Fuller looks like he could contribute quite early. I'd say Kevin P is someone who could find his way into the two deep on the interior. Carrington Coombs, especially with them, utilizing the outside linebacker edge position in a different way in the new defense. I think he's someone who could flash and make some plays early on. He's really an impressive looking kid. I know you got to see him live, but I
Hmm.
only got to see it, like him walking out of his OV. But I'd say them, and then
The one that I heard about was JP Powell.
yeah, that was the other one. But
He's just stacked like physically. Like
yeah, he is built. And yeah, the while we're talking about OVs, real quick, I just got to go on say a funny story. So last weekend I'm there at Georgia Tech, and tall, skinny white kid walks out with his mom and didn't have a necklace, didn't have a chain on, like a thing on or
yeah,
anything.
like his ID thing.
Yeah, and I'm like, huh. I wonder if he was a baseball visitor. 'Cause he, looked built like a baseball player. Next, next thing you know, I see one of the Georgia Tech coaches chasing behind him, and I'm like, oh. And then I looked again. I walked by him, like I intentionally went over towards him to be able to get a second view. And I'm like, excuse my language. I'm like, oh shoot, there's Landon Roldan. And because I didn't recognize him. He didn't have the, like I said, the ID, and didn't have his bags, didn't have a coach like holding his hand or anything. It was interesting.
So what's funny about that is Jed May and I were at the Corky Kell the day that he was there. So that was the 11th or the 12th, whichever day that was. And Jed and all Jed, so Jed found out that he was wearing red cleats. So he walks up to the wrong little white guy with red cleats on and introduces himself. Because I had no idea what he looked like. So I was like, go for it, Jed. I was like, he's like, oh, he's got red. So he walked up to the first kid. There were two kids that both played receiver that were wearing red cleats. He walked up to the wrong one, and kid goes, no, 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 I'm so and so. He's over there. And I was just
It
cracking
clearly
up.
wasn't the first time.
Yeah, I was like, none of us had seen him, so we had no idea.
Yeah,
I mean, he was at a camp that I was at, but I had no idea about anything with that because I was in that camp. I was mainly just watching the O line, D line, and catching up with people. Because those situations where there's 450 kids, it's hard to see much of anything.
yeah.
And so, I didn't see him run. I didn't see any of that stuff, so I wouldn't have known about. I didn't really find out about a lot of that till later on. Someone asked, and I answered this already, but what are you most interested in seeing in the college football game, like features or whatever, when it comes out?
Oh man, I'm excited to see. Well, a part of me wants to say the uniforms because uniforms have changed so much since 2014. But I'm also really, really interested in the recruiting aspect and how they're going to try to replicate what recruiting is now. The fact that you can kind of just push a button and drop a kid is a little bit interesting to me. But I don't know, just seeing how they handle that, and
And apparently, Tommy
dynasty
Tuberville was
mode as a
doing that
whole.
back in the 2000s when it was illegal. So
Yeah, I bet he was. Tommy was doing a lot
there's
of
a
things
very
illegal.
famous story going around. You probably didn't see it, where this dude who's a high school coach um, was telling the story about how Tubbs just cut him on the first day he got the job. I can't remember if it was at Ole Miss or Auburn. Might have been Auburn. It was at Auburn. Now I think about it. And then flash forward, he comes in on a recruiting trip, and this dude's coaching. And yeah, he was. He said, "You karma's bitch."
That's funny.
um, what is Key's recruiting approach or pitch that's getting kids and parents so excited this year? It seems to be a resounding theme in post-visit interviews.
I mean, I think he just doesn't. He's not sugarcoating things. He's not selling them something. He's not telling them something is going to be a certain way, and then once they get there, it's not. You know what I mean? Like, I heard a story about a recruit who went on a visit and got to see the dorms where some of the players live, and they were like, "Oh yeah, this is where you'll be. This is where you'll be." And then the kid signs his letter of intent, moves in, and he's in like the crappiest dorms at the school at the time.
Yeah.
And just that kind of stuff. And word travels quick about those kind of situations. Like you said, karma is can be a problem if you don't handle it the right way. And in that situation, obviously it wasn't handled right. But no, I just think he's honest with them. If he doesn't see a future with them, I think he cuts the meetings quite short. But if you're ready to talk about what life at Georgia Tech could be like, I know we had a pretty lengthy meeting with borderline 5-star 2026 kid Zealous Hicks last week when he was there. I mean, they were talking for quite a bit just about what life at Georgia Tech would be like, um, how he would fit in academically, what might challenge him, where he would fit in terms of working his way around the depth chart, all of that kind of stuff. It's there's several layers to the conversation. They're not just He's not just sitting in front of him and saying, hey, you're not leaving here until you commit. It's not like that. There's so many layers and different factors that kids are looking for that it can become quite a lengthy conversation.
Makes sense. Out of the class so far, who do you think will be the next Gibbs or Singleton? I mean, Gibbs wasn't really under the radar. Gibbs was just got slow played by some big schools because of his size. Really, frankly, but who could be like a guy that people are sleeping on? Well, people were sleeping on Landon, but he's not committed. But
Yeah,
they were sleeping on him for a minute. JP Powell's probably one.
I'd go Canales.
Yeah,
I
they really like his upside. He's a good kid. He seems to have like all the tools. He can play 4 of the 5 O line spots. Maybe he'll teach him how to play center. I don't know. He can play
yeah.
5 of the 5.
I was talking to him. I think it was in the story, but he's going to start out at right tackle, which I think is
Yeah, I
interesting.
put it in the story. That
Yeah, I think he's
he
under recruited. I think the Connor Roush kid is also under recruited for what he is. Um,
yeah, he was
the
sick at the 7-on-7. That was kind of a bummer. And then one game he played, I wasn't over there to watch him. So I
yeah,
don't know. A guy I think could be underrated, and he is a 4-star, but that Sam Turner dude just can play ball, man. Like, I don't know. Like, we watched him a couple times now, and dude just plays ball like he's a really good receiver. And
yeah. I remember at the rivals camp. Yeah, they were talking about putting him in the 250.
yeah, I think maybe, and obviously, I mean, like Georgia visited him. So that's the head to head they've won in this cycle.
Yeah,
So far, that was one we
uh,
left out when we were going
yeah,
through it.
and Jamari Bryce, who had a Georgia offer as well.
Yeah, but I mean, Turner, they had visited him the week before he went to Tech, so like that was straight up like,
Yeah,
hey,
yeah, he camped there.
yeah. Yeah, that's all I got that with that. Let's see if there's anything else we want to get to before we wrap it up. Um, I told them that I expect. I don't know if there's be more commitments this week, but there's more stuff coming. We have more stories ready to go. Um,
Let me look at my list.
Stay tuned to JOL. There's some guys announcing the last week of June and the first week of July too.
Yeah,
That'll be. We already touched on that. Oh, basketball. So there was a commitment today from Dylan. What's Dylan Thompson? His mom's Tina Thompson. His dad's Damon Jones, who played in the NBA. His mom was like one of the greatest like women's basketball players of all time. Um, he is sort of the Ibrahim Asako, Carter Murphy, Hill, Dramonte Hill. What was the other guy that Red reminded me of? He's just this guy that like they'll see if it works out for him. He's got tremendous pedigree, obviously, and he may take a scholarship. He might not. So we'll see what happens with that down the line. But he's brought in to be a guy at the end of the bench, and they'll see if he can develop into more than that. But they're excited about him. He's got some potential. Obviously, has tremendous pedigree genetically. So we'll see. Someone asked who survives the Big 12 or the ACC. I think they both survive. It's just a matter of who's actually in them when it's all said and done. What do these conferences look like? I think no one knows right now at all. No, Sam Tarter would already flip to Georgia. He had his opportunity to go there if he wanted to. I don't know why you're asking that. That's a weird question. Do
they're
do.
gonna make me go on that on a quick rant
Go
because
ahead.
it's just crazy. You know, I think I don't know if Georgia Tech isn't used to success in recruiting from a fan
Oh,
base
you're giving him one of
perspective.
my speeches, dude.
but it's just it's tiring, honestly. I got people in my DMs. I got people asking me in person. Like, I'm just like, go to the grocery store. Someone recognizes me, and they're like, "Do you think we can hold on to such and such? Kentucky's going to come out heavy." And
Kentucky.
I'm like, what? I was like, you think Brent's going to get a kid to commit? Say he's not doing it for months. Do it that night, and then go to Kentucky and just flip? And no, that's not how it works. Like, he's probably not even going to Kentucky anymore this weekend.
Yeah.
And like that's the type of thing where fans have to really just let things play out and understand that, like, they're not just that there's a plan in place, but that the Georgia Tech staff knows what they're doing. And until they prove that they can't, the benefit of the doubt kind of has to be given. The way they lost out on, CJ Jackson and Trajan Greco last cycle was bad. Greco got a little bit over recruited at the end for somebody with his size, but that's
There
besides
was
the
a
point.
bidding war,
That
basically.
they
It's
lost two 4-star in-state kids to an NIL factory in Missouri and LSU. But do I think that in the same situation this cycle, Georgia Tech would lose a kid to Missouri? No, I don't. I don't think if, let's say, Missouri goes in on Dalen Penson later, I don't think in that situation that Georgia Tech's not going to be prepared, ready, willing, and able. And that's not just from a, oh, they have more money now. It's also from a, they have the infrastructure, they have a plan in place to be able to do so.
the thing that Brent and them do a good job of too is they have a plan for each kid, an academic plan, and then the athletic plan, how they're developing them, what the plan is for the future, how they fit into what they're doing, all of those things. And it's very structured. He's a Georgia Tech dude. Like it's very structured. And you'd be surprised at how fly by the seat of the pants a lot of places are with this stuff. A lot of them just hang their flag out or think they can buy a kid, and some families are offended by that stuff. And before you jumped on, Russell, I explained that the NIL things changed a lot in the last 6 months from what they were initially doing now to pivoting to how they're approaching it very different way now. That's more inclusive to the entire roster, including kids that are recruiting, like how they're going to be set up um, for the future. And you got to do all those things if you want to build a roster. You can't. It's like building a baseball team, man. You can't go spend all your money on 5-star pitchers and then have no one in your bullpen. Like, just have a bunch of dudes you called up from AAA. Like, you're gonna suck if you do that. Like, you got to have a closer and a setup guy and a middle guy. Like, you've got to be looking at your whole roster holistically and deciding this is what we need. And then the other thing with Brent too is they're very big on character. They've dropped some kids for character things. They've backed away from kids that were trying to make it too transactional. Because if you're in a transactional situation, those are the kids that flip 4 times and like are chasing money, and clearly their priorities are a little whacked. Because the reality is, if you truly believe in your talent and you think you're Mr. Stud, and then you should have some faith in yourself too, that I'm going to pick the best situation for me to get me in a position to get myself to the next level, and not just be like, I need to make as much money as humanly possible in this entire moment because I'm never going to make any money the rest of my life again, and I'm going to work at McDonald's. Like um that's not how the kids should view this, and those are not the kind of kids that Brent typically recruits.
Absolutely.
um Someone asked us about Groves, who just committed. Oh yeah, I guess we'll go. Let's before we wrap up, let's go through the commits. But I really like this kid, Isaiah. I've had a chance to talk to him a little bit. Uh, I like the Tennessee running backs. They've had a good heritage. The last 3 running backs they've taken from Tennessee, 2 of the 3 are in the NFL, and the other one is Dante Smith. So you have J.P. Mason playing for the 49ers. You had Nate Cottrell, who played for a while with the Jags, even though he didn't play a huge role here. and then Dante Smith. So they've had some good success with guys, and guys not necessarily from the most boisterous areas either. Not like just straight Nashville guys. Like all those dudes are from smaller schools, like Isaiah is.
Yeah, no, I think I like Isaiah a lot, and I think the ability to tap into the state of Tennessee is something they've been able to do in this cycle with him and Jimmy Bryson. I think it's like you said, a talented back, and the combination of him and JP Powell, I think that is something that should have Georgia Tech fans excited, especially with the type of offense and the space that the running backs are going to have. But talking about the running backs, but then you've also got Jamari Bryce, who has been told that he's going to also slide in a little bit into some of the role that Jamal Haynes has had recently. With the swing passes, bubble screens, doing those kind of things. I think that trio in the backfield and getting the ball in their hands regularly, all of them are electric in space.
By the way, I don't know if you know this, Russell. I put this on the board, but Isaiah's older brother, who's a freshman linebacker at NC State,
Yep.
is you know about his younger brother, who's the Rivals 250 defensive end at that high school.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That'll be
So
interesting to see if they can pull the pull the brother card and get the last OV like Duke is with Blake this weekend.
yeah, these guys are going to be all over the place, like the Griffin brothers. Remember, one at VT, one at Georgia Tech, and then he went to Oregon State, and then Ole Miss. And is Jam back at Oregon State? Is that what happened?
I think so.
I think he went back there. Yeah. Um, Holy crap.
Yeah, he tweeted 6 hours ago that he's so excited for the season.
That's
And
funny.
he's hyping up. He looks like he wants them to get some damnation backpack coolers. Go
Sweet.
Beavs.
So we've talked about Canales. We talked about Isaiah Groves. The kid from Connecticut, the giant tight end. How giant is he, Russell?
I mean, he's a legit 6'8". I interviewed, gosh, was it Samto?
Yeah.
Samto when he was at OTE. He is maybe an inch and a half, maybe 2 inches shorter than him. Like it wasn't. It's not fabricated. I mean, they're not. He's not one of those kids that lists that he's 6'2", and you go see him in person and he's 5'9" and a half. He's a legit. I think it was 6'8", 240, something like that.
Yeah, I'm looking up. I have my notes from the camp he was at to
Yeah,
see
he's
what he measured
he's
in at.
good ball skills. I mean,
He had a
he's
Calvin catch. That's his first highlight, is like a Calvin
yeah,
Johnson esque going up and grabbing the football, which always impresses me to see. And he seems like a Georgia Tech kind of kid.
yeah. He's the type of kid that you know Nathan Brock really has cut his teeth in and really likes a lot. He's the unofficial official tight ends coach,
So
and
6'8" and 3/8, 240.
yeah, like it's legit. And they saw him camp, they saw him live, they watched it, they offered. I mean, I'm not sure what the hesitancy or question is. You know, we'll see what happens with David Prince. We'll see what happens with Luke Harpring. I mean, I think, but until you see major recruiting misses from this coaching staff, again, you have to, as a fan, at least in my eyes, you're supposed to believe in the coaching staff, especially when they're putting a quality product on the field and competing in every game. I don't know.
I mean, look at what they did with Ethan McKinney last year as a true freshman offensive tackle that was like a low 3-star guy that had like a handful of offers.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, exactly.
or, you know, Kyle Eford and like what they've done with him. Or
Yeah,
there's been a bunch of them that, like, they've managed. I mean, Singleton. Like no one expected any of that from that kid. I thought he was going to return kicks and like be like, you know, play a little bit, and then he turns into like a freshman All American. Other commits, Jaden Barr. He's like a safety man. Like
Yeah,
just
yeah,
a
he's a
traditional safety. Like you know what he is, know what he's going to do, and he's a guy who'll help you on special teams probably early on too. I would think.
yeah. No, I agree with that.
Carrington Coombs from
Yeah, we talked about him.
Ebron Christian Academy.
I love his versatility. He's so long and athletic. I think he's got a chance to really be special. And I'm pretty sure that Rivals is on a little bit of an island in terms of rating him as highly as they are. But the kid's got a chance to really break out this year.
We talked about Counter Rush, talked about Kevin P a little bit, who I got to see. I need to go dig out. I got some video of Kevin P from the Rivals camp that I'll put up at some point. Dalen Penson, you talked about without talking about, but just some quick thoughts on the talented corner commit the Jackets got.
State champion. But Dalen is electric. Like you said, I think he's going to be more than just a corner. I think he's going to play both ways.
Yeah,
I think he's also going to be that guy in the nickel that has that level of physicality, but also the ability to cover in space and be trusted. He's the type of guy that can take a little bit of pressure off of some others on the defense, because one on one he's lined up with a guy like Sam Turner and he's going step for step with him. There were times where I was watching Dalen in the 7-on-7 Corky Kellett at Tech, and I'm sure all of the Georgia Tech coaches probably were too, where he was basically running the routes for the receivers and and making plays. But he plays much bigger than his listed height and weight too, which is always what you like to have, especially at the year 2024 in the secondary, where you've got to be confident, if not cocky, to be successful.
they got Phoenix Felton from Eagles Landing Christian. Who was one of the first official visitors that first weekend, and then committed, I think, after the second weekend in that flurry of the first flurry of commitments off the second
Yes.
review weekend.
Yeah, he was one that he had a bunch of visits scheduled, and he met with Coach Key, and Coach Key and him talked, and he was like, I think this is where I really want to be, but I want to take my visits. I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but it was more along the lines of that, and he was able to go on the visits. That was a decision he had made. He wasn't being squeezed or anything like that. Visited Georgia Tech for the one of the Corky Kells.
Yep.
And decided that was going to be home for him. Made the decision, canceled the visits, and that was really that. I think he's another type of kid where he could be a little bit overlooked in terms of the extremely highly rated kids they have committed, but I think he's someone who can go pound for pound, rep for rep with some of the better kids in the state. I think he showed that in the 7-on-7. He made a massive catch. I don't know if I have video of it, but at like first game of the day, I don't even know if it wasn't even 10 a.m. yet, but he's a kid that I think will get some more power forward attention as time goes on. It looks like, according to his Rivals profile, he has 2 other ones right now. I think that number will grow.
We talked about Jamari Bryce. We've talked about Sam Turner. We talked about JP. Jimmy Bryson, the center, he was like Jeep's top center guy. And
yeah, he was a lot of people's top center guy. He destroyed, I think it was the Under Armour camp in Tennessee.
Yeah, might have been.
Yeah, and as soon as he did that, the video of that kind of got around, and schools all over the country were ready to invite him to camps. We're ready to, try to get to his school to see him in person. But he kind of, remained humble through the whole process and kind of tried to stay close with who he was close with. Just a quick funny story with him is, he was talking about all these, visits he wanted to go on before he ended up canceling them and committing. And I noticed each one was, a really strong academic school. And I was like, a Nashville area kid. I'm like, or not Nashville, I think it's Chattanooga, but
No, Chattanooga, man. Yeah,
yeah,
Chattanooga.
yeah. So, but state of Tennessee. And I'm like, huh, a lot of academic schools. I'm surprised Vanderbilt's not in there. And he's like, oh, they tried. I have no interest in it. I'm like, well, at least you're honest. And
I think it was
he,
Virginia and Indiana were the other two. He was supposed to visit those two, and he just tapped those out and committed.
yeah, I think there may
Um,
have been an Ivy League school too, but yeah.
and then the last one, and we'll wrap up on this one, is the Duke. The Duke who
You talking about
has been getting offers
Rashawn
after
Dinkins?
committing. Yeah, Dinkins that
Yeah.
committed, and then has been getting more offers from SEC schools since, which is very funny.
Oh man, I love that kid. That kid. I wouldn't call him overlooked. When you look at his offer list, when you look at his ranking, when you look at things like that. But in terms of being one of the under talked about kids in the class currently, I don't think you could talk too much about him and what he brings to the table defensively. At times he helped carry Warner Robins last year. Isaiah Gibson gets a lot of the pub and the credit because he's able to get to the quarterback, but he's able to have time to get to the quarterback because the quarterback can't get rid of the ball because Dinkins is shutting down a whole side of the field.
Yeah, he had offers from most of quite a few P5s. Florida State was on him pretty hard at one point. Michigan State, USC offered him. The real USC, not the fake one in Columbia, South Carolina. Um, yeah, I mean, that seems like a really good get for them. And he was like, I think the third commit for the class. Like he was the first one to pop after that weekend
Yeah,
of OVs, and that was a really big one for them to get that kid locked down so early and keep him from taking other visits as well.
yeah, yeah. He had Tennessee, Texas A&M, like you said, Southern Cal, Ole Miss. Like he had plenty of options,
Yep.
and he was one of the first calls that Peoples made when he got the job, and just kind of went from there.
Yeah, it's been crazy.
But
It'll be
yeah,
interesting to see how the rest of the class shapes up. They seem to be aiming towards 25-man class, which is fascinating in this day and age with the portal. But Brent really believes in building organically and then backfilling with the portal and trying to keep his kids here. So I think you're seeing sort of that philosophy play out. And also, this is the last year of a lot of the COVID guys, so there'll be some dudes kind of getting cleared out that were the last of the COVID kids with the extra years. So I think that about wraps it up, Russell. I know you're probably about to black out on me. Uh, I think that it's been an interesting month. We'll try to circle back. We're going to have stuff to talk about, I think, in a few weeks again as this goes on. And I have some other cool video projects that we're kind of working on as things settle down and I'm not spending 8 of 10 days at a camp or something, eating up all my time. So, and Russell doing the same thing. So I think that, I think there's a lot of excitement over the next couple of weeks. Stay tuned to Jackets Online for all that. Like, comment, subscribe on our videos on here. Share them with your Georgia Tech friends. Tell them about the site. Helps me and Russell out. And thanks, everyone. And good night from beautiful Cobb County and Cherokee County, where Russell is, right?
that's right.
Thanks, guys.